take a breath, soft, emotional tone. The hospital lights, they were too bright, too cold. I was 9. I remember the smell of antiseptic clinging to everything. My throat hurt, my head throbbed, but mostly my heart ached. She was there at first, my mother. Her hand, it felt small in mine. She promised she'd be back. "Just a little while, my love," she'd whispered. Her eyes, I can still see them. A flicker of something. Fear? Shame? I didn't know then. I just saw her turn and walk away. The nurses were kind. Too kind, almost. Their pity felt like another kind of wound. "Your mother will be here soon, dear." They said it every day. And every day, she wasn't. I counted the hours, then the days, then the weeks. Each tick of the clock, a hammer blow. Each sunrise, a fresh betrayal. The silence of my room, it became a living thing. It whispered her name. It echoed her promise, and it screamed that I wasn't worth coming back for. I tried to be good, so good. Maybe if I was good enough, she'd remember me. She'd miss me. She'd come back. But she didn't. The empty chair beside my bed, it was a monument to her absence, a monument to my unworthiness. The feeling of being forgotten, it seeped into my bones, into my very soul. It was a cold, creeping thing, a shadow that followed me everywhere. Even when I left the hospital, even when I went to live with my aunt, the shadow was there, a constant reminder. You are alone. You are not enough. Every time the phone rang, my heart leapt. Every time someone knocked on the door, I held my breath. It was always someone else, never her. The hope, it faded slowly, like a dying ember, until there was nothing left but ash and a deep, burning resentment. I didn't cry much, not outwardly. The tears, they felt like a weakness, a confirmation of my pain, and I was determined not to show it. But inside, a storm raged. A constant battle against the feeling of being discarded, unwanted, unloved. I started to build walls, thick walls, high walls, around my heart, around my emotions, to protect myself from that kind of pain again. Never again. The laughter of other children, it sounded hollow. Their parents' hugs, they felt alien. I watched them from a distance, an outsider looking in, always. The question echoed in my mind. Why? Why did she leave? What was wrong with me? Was I so bad that even my own mother couldn't bear to be with me? That question, it poisoned everything. Every friendship, every fleeting moment of happiness. It was always there, underneath it all. I carried that weight, that heavy, invisible burden through my childhood, through my teenage years. It shaped me. It made me careful. Too careful, afraid to trust, afraid to love, afraid to be loved, because love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant abandonment again. I grew up with that voice in my head, her voice. Or maybe
my own voice, reflecting her absence. You are not enough. That voice, it became my constant companion. You are not enough. It echoed in my adult life, a silent, insidious poison. Every relationship I tried to build, it was tainted by that fear, that desperate need for acceptance, for proof that I was worthy.
I chose partners who mirrored the wound, people who were emotionally unavailable, who kept me at arm's length, who, in subtle ways, repeated the message, "You are not enough." I chased their approval, their fleeting affection, believing that if only I could earn it, the hole inside me would finally fill. It never did. I became an expert at self-sabotage, pushing people away before they could leave me, creating distance so I wouldn't feel the sting of abandonment again. It was a twisted kind of protection. The anxiety was a constant hum, a low-grade dread that never truly left. In social gatherings, I felt like an imposter. In quiet moments, the emptiness pressed in. I was exhausted from the constant vigilance, from trying to be someone I wasn't, from carrying the weight of that old wound. It drained my energy, my joy, my very will to exist. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. The fatigue was bone deep, a weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. It was the fatigue of a soul crying out, unheard. My emotions were a tangled mess, anger simmering just beneath the surface, sadness, a dull ache in my chest, and a pervasive sense of loneliness, even when I was surrounded by people. I remember one night I was watching a random documentary online, something about psychology. I was just trying to numb the noise in my head, and then a name flashed on the screen. Jung. Carl Jung. A voice, calm and deep, spoke. The wound is the place where the light enters. I paused the video. The words hung in the air. They sounded profound, but I didn't truly grasp them. Not then.
I just felt a flicker of something, a strange resonance, like a distant bell ringing. It was interesting, but it didn't click. Not yet. I dismissed it, went back to scrolling, to trying to escape the heavy blanket of my own thoughts. The idea of a wound letting in light, it seemed impossible. My wound felt like a black hole, devouring all light. I was stuck in a loop, repeating old patterns, reliving the abandonment, trying to solve the puzzle of my past with the same broken pieces. I felt like I was perpetually waiting for something to change, for someone to save me, for the pain to finally disappear. But nothing changed, because I hadn't changed. The silence grew louder, the inner critic more vicious. You're unlovable. You deserve this. No one will ever stay. It was a slow, agonizing dismoronamento, a quiet implosion. My spirit was shrinking, dimming, until I barely recognized myself. I had become my wound, defined by it, limited by it. I was a prisoner of that hospital room, still waiting, still abandoned. And yet, that phrase, "the wound is the place where the light enters," it lingered,
a seed planted in the barren ground of my despair, unseen, waiting for its time. If you've ever lived through something like this, comment. Sometimes just writing it down is the beginning of healing. The quiet desperation eventually pushed me to search for anything that might explain what I felt, why I felt so broken. I found myself drawn back to that name, Jung. Not a person, really, more like a whisper in the back of my mind, a nagging curiosity. I started small. Take a breath. An article here, a YouTube video there, and then I found it. A book. Not a self-help book, something deeper, something that felt ancient and profoundly true. I began to read, slowly at first, then ravenously, and it was like someone had finally handed me the map to a territory I had been blindly navigating my whole life. His words, they were not simple, but they resonated. They echoed the very core of my being, and for the first time, I felt seen, understood, even by a man long gone. Then I read it again. That phrase, the one I'd dismissed before. The wound is the place where the light enters. This time, it wasn't just words. It was a revelation. I thought about my abandonment, the deep, gaping chasm it had left, and for years I had seen it as a void, a curse, a testament to my flaw. But Jung, he suggested something else, that this very wound, this source of so much pain, could also be the doorway to something else, to growth, to wisdom, to light. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The idea that my greatest weakness could become my greatest strength. It challenged everything I believed about myself. I started to see the patterns in my relationships, in my constant need for external validation, in the exhaustion. It wasn't just me being bad, it was the unconscious driving my life. Another phrase of his hit me hard. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it destiny. Destiny. I had certainly called it that. My fate, to be abandoned, to be alone. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was just my unconscious playing out the same old script over and over again because I hadn't seen it, because I hadn't brought it to the light? The realization was painful. It meant taking responsibility for my reactions, for my choices, even when those choices felt like they were forced upon me by that deeply ingrained wound. I began to look inward, not with self-pity, but with a fierce curiosity. What was hiding in the shadows? What parts of me had I disowned because they were too painful to acknowledge? I started to understand my shadow, the parts of myself I hated, my neediness, my anger, my fear. These weren't just flaws. They were aspects of me that needed to be integrated, not suppressed. What you resist persists. Another profound truth. I had resisted the pain of abandonment. I had resisted acknowledging my need for love. And because I resisted it, it persisted, it festered, it controlled me. The journey was not easy. It meant revisiting that hospital room, not to re-traumatize myself, but to observe it, to understand the pain of that 9-year-old girl, to finally give her the compassion she deserved, the compassion I had denied myself for so long. It was like performing psychic surgery, carefully, gently exposing the nerve, not to cause more pain, but to begin the process of healing, to allow the air, the light to reach it. I started to challenge the old voice. You are not enough. Was that truly my voice? Or was it the echoing wound? The voice of a frightened child? A child who didn't understand? Jung wasn't offering a quick fix. He was offering a path of self-discovery, a path of integration, a way to make whole what had been fragmented by pain. The world didn't change overnight, but my perception of it did. And that made all the difference. The wound is still there, I won't lie. It's not a magical cure, but now it feels different. It's no longer a gaping chasm. It's a scar, a mark of survival, a place where the light truly does enter. I began to understand. My mother's abandonment, it wasn't about me. It was about her struggles, her limitations, her own unhealed wounds. This didn't excuse her, but it allowed me to finally release the suffocating burden of self-blame. That young girl in the hospital bed, she wasn't unlovable. She was a child in pain. And now I could finally be the mother to myself, the one I never had, the one who stayed, who nurtured, who saw my worth. Reconciliation wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting what happened, accepting the pain it caused, and accepting that I could move forward without carrying the resentment like a stone in my gut. I learned to sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge the fear, not to let it control me. When that old voice, "you are not enough," tried to creep back in, I could gently, firmly tell it, "No, that's the wound speaking, and I am more than my wound." I started building new relationships, slower, more carefully, with boundaries, because now I knew my own value. I didn't need someone else to define it for me. I chose people who saw me, the real me, not the abandoned child. The exhaustion slowly lifted as I stopped fighting myself. As I stopped running from my own shadow, I found a quiet strength, a resilience I didn't know I possessed. My perspective on life shifted. I no longer saw myself as a victim of destiny. I saw myself as the architect of my own consciousness, making choices, healing old patterns, step by painful, beautiful step.